Nearly 100 Russian troops were reportedly taken out of the fight in a failed reinforcement push, while transport vehicles, supply trucks, and support assets were hit before they could even reach their staging points. At the same time, air defense systems, supply depots, and communication nodes farther behind the line were still being hunted. In a very short span, the battlefield showed the same warning sign again and again. The danger was no longer limited to one road, one vehicle, or one explosion. What makes this more serious is the pattern behind it. These strikes no longer look random or isolated. They appear to connect into one chain, starting from approach routes, then moving to hiding places, then reaching tanks, artillery, and even rear area systems once thought to be safer. A road can turn into a trap. A dugout can turn into a grave. A vehicle that slows down for a few seconds can become the first target in a much larger collapse. Stay here with us as the real story is not only about what was destroyed, but about how modern drone warfare is starting to squeeze an army layer by layer. The harder question is now impossible to ignore. If drones are no longer just cheap weapons of harassment, but tools that can break the rhythm of an entire battlefield, then what happens when every road, every shelter, and every support line can be watched from above before the next attack even begins? FPV drones have become a daily killing tool across the front, and that change is now easy to see in the way small Russian movements keep ending in sudden losses before a larger fight even begins. Units such as Signum and Magyar birds appear again and again in footage tied to attacks on infantry, Bukanka vans, light trucks, troop carriers, and other soft targets near the forward line. The striking point is not only that these targets are vulnerable, it is that they are being hunted so often that the battlefield no longer feels dangerous only during an assault. It feels dangerous all the time. A Russian group can still try to move in the same old way, but the timing now works against it. A few soldiers step out from cover and pause to check direction. A van pulls off near a tree line to unload supplies. A transport vehicle appears from behind brush and rolls into open ground for only a short stretch. In each case, the exposure may last seconds, yet that is often enough. The drone team does not need a dramatic opening. It only needs that small moment when a shape becomes clear, when spacing tightens, or when movement slows just enough to be read from above. That is why these strikes feel less like separate incidents and more like one long pressure cycle. The drone does not always attack the first thing it sees. It can stay back, hold height, and watch the target settle into a pattern. If infantry keeps walking in the same direction, the operator keeps tracking. If a vehicle turns off the road and stops by cover, the operator waits to see whether troops dismount. If a Bukanka reaches a point where trees thin out and the roofline is clean in the frame, that may be the instant chosen for the final run. Patience is now part of the weapon. This creates a very different rhythm on the ground. Russian troops are not only trying to reach a position, they are trying to survive the act of getting there. That changes behavior in visible ways. Men bunch up for a moment because they want quick orders. Drivers stop too close because the road is narrow or damaged. A crew believes a line of bushes will hide a vehicle long enough to unload. Then the hit comes, and the scene changes at once. A side door opens, men run in two directions, someone drops into a ditch, another figure freezes near the rear wheel, and a second drone begins to close in while the first strike is still being understood. The damaging effect is larger than the blast itself, because it spreads fear through routine actions. A foot patrol can no longer trust a short move between tree lines. A supply run cannot assume that reaching the edge of a grove means safety. Even a brief stop to reorganize can become the most dangerous part of the mission. This is where FPV pressure grows heavier than simple destruction. The drone is not only removing a target, it is forcing every soldier nearby to think like prey. That may be the most important change in this phase of the war. FPV is no longer just a cheap tool that explodes on contact. It is a constant source of pursuit that follows, watches, and waits for the weak second when a man or machine becomes readable. Once that feeling spreads through a unit, movement slows, confidence drops, and every trip toward the front begins with the same thought. The sky may already be looking. The failed reinforcement push shows how a single road can become a battlefield of its own. And once that happens, the column is already in danger before the first explosion appears. The movement begins with a clear purpose. Russian vehicles try to carry men and supplies through a narrow, damaged route before Ukrainian eyes in the sky can lock onto them. The lane is rough, the shoulders are weak, and the open stretch ahead gives little room for error. Yet the column still moves fast, because speed seems like the only protection left when armor is limited and the route must stay active. The logic behind this push is easy to understand. If the convoy crosses the exposed section quickly enough, troops can unload near the staging area, scatter, and build pressure farther forward before a strike arrives. Poor visibility can also look like an advantage. Dust, haze, low light, or broken terrain may seem enough to blur the movement for a few critical minutes. That belief keeps the vehicles going. A troop carrier pushes ahead, a light truck follows close behind, and smaller transport platforms try to stay near the main body so none of them are left alone in the open. But from above, the picture looks very different. A Ukrainian reconnaissance drone does not rush into the attack. It stays with the formation and studies it. The operator watches the gaps between vehicles, the points where wheels slide around potholes, and the places where the route narrows between soft ground and broken edges. The key detail is not only where the convoy is, it is where the convoy will have to slow down. That is where the trap starts taking shape. As the column reaches a tighter section, the rhythm changes. The lead vehicle eases off because the road ahead is uneven. The second closes the distance too quickly. A third drifts near the shoulder and corrects late. In seconds, the loose spacing disappears. The convoy is no longer a moving line with some freedom inside it. It becomes one packed stream with too little room to turn, reverse, or break away. That is the moment the first FPV commits. The strike hits the vehicle at the front or near the head of the movement, and the effect goes far beyond one damaged machine. The road is suddenly blocked by flame, smoke, or twisted metal. Drivers behind slam brakes and angle toward mud that cannot support the weight. Doors open at once. Troops jump out under pressure and run in different directions, some toward the ditch, others toward thin cover near the road. What looked seconds earlier like a reinforcement push now begins to look like a trapped mass trying to escape a closed lane. Once the men are on foot, the route is still jammed, and the strike sequence continues. Another drone does not need to search a wide area. The targets are already arranged by the choke point itself. One group hugs the wreck because smoke feels safer than open ground. Another cluster forms near a stalled truck as soldiers pull gear and wounded men clear. A third pair drops into a shallow cut beside the lane. Each of those choices creates another aim point. The movement that was meant to bring order to the front now produces confusion in the worst place possible. The most important lesson from this attack is not simply that a vehicle was destroyed. It is that the entire road lost its function at the exact moment the force needed it most. What happens after the road is hit may be even more dangerous than the strike itself, because the survivors do what soldiers are trained to do. They scatter, they look for cover, and they try to disappear before the next drone arrives. But on this battlefield, that instinct is starting to fail. The men who jump out of vehicles and run from the smoke do not find safety. They move from one exposed point to another, and each place that looks like protection turns into the next stage of the attack. Some of them rush toward a trench line cut into the earth a short distance from the road. From ground level, it looks like the best option available. The lip is low, the ditch is deep enough to hide a body, and the dark soil blends into the field. The operator now has the angle. An FPV comes in lower, drops toward the section where the movement was last seen, and the trench that looked like a narrow lifeline becomes the exact path of the next hit. Others avoid the open ditch and push farther back toward a dugout or basement near a ruined structure. That choice feels smarter. Men squeeze through the entrance, dragging gear and trying to pull the wounded off the ground. Then the weakness of that shelter reveals itself. A thermal drone catches heat, gathering near the entry point. The operator watches the opening long enough to understand how the place is being used. The FPV descends, lines up with the visible gap, and dives through the opening. Inside that confined space, there is no clean way to react. The same entrance that gave protection becomes the only exit, and everyone inside needs it at once. Farther off, a tank crew that had stayed hidden near the tree line now faces the same collapse of safety. The vehicle is tucked behind cover, branches are draped over the hull, and from the ground it seems well concealed. Yet the chaos on the road has already drawn attention across the area, and the drone crew begins searching for nearby support assets that may try to intervene or withdraw. The tank remains still, but one detail gives it away. The gun barrel extends too far beyond the foliage, and the rear deck is partly visible from above. The drone circles once and keeps distance while the operator studies the cleanest route in. The FPV drops toward the engine compartment or the commander's hatch, and in one instant the tank loses the ability to move, fight, or hold its crew in place. It survives as metal, but not as a weapon. Then the pressure reaches the artillery position behind it. A gun crew that had been waiting for its next fire mission hears the growing noise from the road and starts preparing to shift. The piece sits near rough woodland, partly screened, with tracks leading in and a narrow path ready for relocation. But that pause between firing and movement is now one of the most dangerous moments on the field. A reconnaissance drone has already marked the position. The operator does not rush the attack. The FPV comes only when the crew is committed, when some are still at the weapon and others are just beginning to move. The hit lands where it matters most, near the working area of the gun or the crew around it. That is enough to stop the next shot, delay the next move, and break the role the weapon was meant to play. These situations explained why no shelter feels certain anymore. The men run from the road and choose the best protection they can see. Yet every choice leads into another layer of danger. Once the sky has the target, almost anything can be reached. The most serious escalation is that the pressure no longer stops at the forward line, because the same logic of drone warfare is now reaching deeper into the rear and pulling support systems into danger. What used to look like distance now looks more like delay. A supply point, an air defense position, a communication mast, or an energy site may sit farther from direct fighting, yet once it is found and watched, it can still become part of the same chain of attack. That is why the battlefield now feels wider and narrower at the same time. It stretches far behind the contact line, but safe space inside it keeps shrinking. The sequence often begins with movement that seems ordinary. A truck enters a rear road with crates, fuel, or ammunition. Another vehicle follows with technical gear or fresh supplies for units closer to the line. The route may look calmer than the front, and the men inside may believe the hardest part of the trip has already passed. But the weakness lies in habit. Rear roads are used again and again. Unloading points become familiar. Ukraine drone teams do not need a dramatic target at first. They only need to learn where traffic slows, where vehicles turn in, and where cargo is left before being pushed forward again. Once that pattern is understood, the effect of a strike grows much larger than the blast itself. A truck destroyed on a rear approach does not only remove one load, it delays everything tied to that load. Men waiting closer to the front may not receive fuel on time. Repair teams may lose parts they expected that night. Crews may sit in place longer because movement depends on resupply that no longer arrives. The damage spreads forward through absence. The men near the front may not see the burning vehicle that caused it, but they feel the result when tasks slow and timing breaks. Communication is just as vulnerable, and in many ways it is even more important because it holds the whole system together. Antennas planted in forest, relay nodes near tree lines, wireless bridges mounted on tall points, and satellite equipment placed beside command areas all have one thing in common. They must remain exposed enough to work. That need creates a problem once drones begin hunting them. A roof that gives better signal also gives clearer sight from above. A mast that improves coverage also makes itself easy to locate. A radar near a staging area may look small, but once it is identified, one strike can silence a link that many units depend on. Orders slow, correction becomes harder, and positions that were supposed to act together begin operating with gaps between them. Then the pressure moves toward air defense. Systems such as Tor, Buk, Pantsir, and S-300 are not just valuable because they fire missiles. They matter because they shape how much freedom exists in the sky above Russian positions. Recently, a Pantsir position showed how fast rear area protection can break down once the radar is found first. The system was placed in what should have been a safer zone, covering nearby assets and scanning for threats. Yet that same exposed radar made the site easier to identify. Ukrainian drones struck the position, and reports said the Pantsir radar and related elements were disabled or destroyed. These situations matters because the radar is the eyes of the whole system. Once those eyes are damaged, warning time collapses, and the area behind them becomes harder to protect. A hit like that does not only damage one vehicle, it opens a wider gap in the sky and leaves the rear more exposed in the hours that follow. A new layer of this war is now unfolding above the battlefield, because Ukraine is no longer using drones only to strike targets on the ground. It is also sending interceptor drones after Russian UAVs in the air, and that changes the meaning of control in a very direct way. The sky is no longer just a route for reconnaissance and attack. It is becoming a place where one unmanned system hunts another, and where the loss of a single Russian drone can break the next step of a wider operation before it ever reaches the front. That shift becomes clearer in the case of a Zala reconnaissance drone. It flies high enough to watch movement below and steady enough to build a picture for artillery or follow-on strikes. From the ground, that aircraft may be almost invisible. But once it is tracked, the interceptor does not rush in blindly. It climbs into the same airspace, stays behind the Zala's line of movement, and closes the gap little by little. The operator waits until the angle is clean and the target has no room to drift away without losing stability. Then the interceptor accelerates, comes in from the rear quarter, and strikes the drone in the body or tail section. The same pattern appears in a different form when a Lancet enters the fight. This is not a drone built to watch quietly for a long time. It is already part of the kill chain, launched to hit a gun, a vehicle, or a position that has likely been identified earlier. That makes the interception even more important, because the timing window is shorter and the danger is more immediate. The Ukrainian interceptor has to meet it before the terminal dive begins. The chase is tighter and faster. The operator keeps the nose steady, matches the Lancet's path, and waits for the moment when the target commits forward and loses some freedom to turn. Then the interceptor dives in. The collision does not just save one object on the ground. It breaks the final link in a strike sequence that may have started minutes earlier with reconnaissance, target confirmation, and route calculation. The whole effort collapses in the air. Another shows an Orlan, smaller and cheaper, but still dangerous because it can saturate attention and add pressure where defenses are already busy. The Ukrainian drone climbs to meet it, tracks the line of travel, and stays patient while the target keeps moving toward the defended zone. The drone slides into a better angle, then snaps forward and hits with enough force to send fragments spinning away. A cheap aircraft is gone, but the deeper result is that one more layer of incoming pressure has been removed before it could join the larger attack pattern. When those cases are placed together, the larger method becomes hard to miss. The battlefield is no longer shaped only by what explodes on the ground. It is shaped by which side can see longer, react faster, and remove the next threat before it completes its part of the system. If that model keeps spreading, what is at risk will not be just single targets. It will be the working rhythm of an entire sector. What makes this story so serious is that the most dangerous change may not be one strike, one burning vehicle, or one destroyed radar. It may be the fact that all these hits now seem to belong to the same system, and once that system starts working across the whole battlefield, the damage spreads far beyond the first explosion. Infantry is being tracked from the moment it moves. Trenches, dugouts, and basements no longer guarantee safety once they are found. rear areas are also under pressure, with depots, communication nodes, power links, and air defense systems all being pulled into the same threat zone. That is why this model feels so dangerous. It does not always need a dramatic breakthrough to matter. It only needs to hit the right road, the right relay point, the right radar, or the right supply movement at the right moment. The bigger question now is what comes next. Will Russia find a way to restore movement, hide support systems better, and protect the rear more effectively? Or will this pressure deepen until entire sectors begin losing rhythm before a major clash even starts? That may be the real issue to watch in the weeks ahead. Share the view in the comments. If this breakdown helped make sense of what is changing in Ukraine, like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to Military Force for more clear and grounded battlefield analysis.